Okay, so we've got this introduction, and Bart talks about how he used to be a Christian. He used to believe this, and he had a friend that also is a Christian that he mentioned in this introduction. And I wanted to talk about here some of the way he's phrased some things. I could see the rhetorical flair, but also some non sequiturs that sort of come out in his writing. I'm just on page 2 here in this introduction. He writes here, I'll read the paragraph, "But I had changed over the years, and now in middle age I am no longer a believer. Instead, I am a historian of early Christianity, who for nearly 3 decades has studied the New Testament and the rise of the Christian religion from a historical perspective. And now my question in some ways is the precise opposite of my friends. As a historian, I am no longer obsessed with the theological question of how God became a man, but with the historical question of how a man became God." You see here, he's looking at this perspective now from 2 different things, right? It's no longer a theological query, it's a historical query. And he sort of inverted it. It's not about, how is it that God can become a man, but a man could become God? Why is that highlighted? Well, on the very next page, this paragraph right here, top of 3, "In this book I have tried to approach this question in a new way that will be useful not only for secular historians of religion like me, but also for believers like my friend who continue to think that Jesus is in fact God. As a result, I do not take a stand on the theological question of Jesus' divine status. I am instead interested in the historical development that led to the affirmation that he is God. This historical development certainly transpired in one way or another, and what people personally believe about Christ should not, in theory, affect the conclusions they draw historically." I don't think that's quite right, because there's a way of starting this journey that already has assumptions built in. So one of the assumptions here is when Ehrman writes that this historical question is how a man could become God. Now, is he explicitly saying a mere man? No, but I think that's being implied here, because to him it's peculiar that Jesus is not thought of as divine from the get-go or all along, but rather the starting point for Ehrman is that Jesus is a mere man who becomes divine in the mind of his followers. Even the way he phrased this, that a man become God, at least historically speaking, this would be adoptionism, the heresy of adoptionism, this idea that Jesus was just a man and then became divine. You already see here that this is not neutral ground that he's trying to craft here. It's already baked into the way he's phrased his project. So in this regard, it's not from a ground of neutrality, which I don't know if you can be neutral, but the point here is that he's trying to be neutral on page 3 when he says, "I do not take a stand on the theological question," but I think it's clear that he already has. That was the one thing that I wanted to talk about from the introduction. There's a few other points that are worth mentioning just so we can get a better understanding of where he's at. I've tried my best to kind of color code my own. You can see I've already got orange and green and yellow highlights. I have my own little system. And so yellow would be sort of just data points that are worth absorbing. They're not necessarily logical steps that Ehrman is trying to provide for us, or he's not trying to make an assertion or push us one way. They're just kind of matter of fact. So here's one on top to middle of 5. "One of my theses will be that a Christian text, such as the Gospel of Mark, understands Jesus in the first way as a human who came to be made divine. The Gospel of John understands him in the second way as a divine being who became human. Both of them see Jesus as divine, but in different ways." Isn't that interesting? What did he just write? "I do not take a stand on the theological question of Jesus' divine status." And then he's making a claim already that Mark and John have a disagreement in their Christology. Yes, they both see Jesus as divine, but in different ways. There's already a division that Ehrman has proposed between the Gospel of Mark and the Gospel of John. Again, he's only going to be neutral for so long, maybe 2 pages. Moreover, did he talk about himself as a divine being? Ehrman writes, "I will argue that he did not." Now, I take big issue with this. It's in yellow because this is simply Bart describing his views, not telling us what we should believe, or I don't think it's rhetorical flair, or it's not just, a part of his argument that he's trying to push here. He's just telling us his view. Again, this is sort of a quick just data set here. Again, this idea of neutrality, I mean, come on. He doesn't take the stand on the theological question of Jesus' divine status, but he's already claiming Jesus never spoke of himself as divine, and I just do not agree with him there. I don't agree with him certainly regarding the Gospel of John. I don't agree with him either regarding his interpretation of the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, or Luke. So that's the introduction. That's just what I wanted to say from there. See, again, it's not quite a read-through. It's not a read-along, but I wanted to walk through the text here so that if you wanted to read along with me, I'd be happy to engage your comments. If you've got questions about what we're reading together in the live stream, we can review these together.